Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to talk today about how the U.S. should return the Balangiga bells to the Philippines. They were taken by the United States in the U.S.-Filipino War that happened, or the U.S.-Philippine War, I should say, that happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the Balangiga bells were taken, and now they sit at a U.S. Air Force base in Wyoming, and they should be returned. However, first of all, they should be returned ASAP. Okay, but the Balangiga bells were not, they were taken when a church was tore down because the Filipinos were dressed as women like they were attending a funeral. U.S. soldiers came close to them, and the Philippine soldiers killed 48 U.S. soldiers. And that kind of warfare tactic in that war was commonplace, okay? The U.S. shouldn't have been involved in that war, and that war was a scar on U.S. history because the United States should have let the Philippines be independent when they wanted to, okay? Philippines was a Spanish colony for around 300 years, and when the United States defeated Spain in the Spanish-American War, the Spain relinquished the Philippines to the United States, but Spain said, we're surrendering to the United States because we know you're not going to massacre us after the surrender. We're not surrendering to the Filipinos because they will massacre us right after we surrender. So Spain agreed to surrender to the United States. The Philippines became a U.S. colony. Well, shortly after the Philippines became a U.S. colony, the Philippines wanted to become their own country. And the majority of the Philippine population wanted to be their own country. Okay? But it wasn't the vast majority of them, and let me explain. The reason vote-wise they wanted to be an independent country is because pro-American villages were massacred by Filipino guerrillas that wanted to be independent. That's how the Philippine Scouts were developed. They're elite Philippine military unit that did amazing things for the Americans and the Philippines in World War II. But they developed because they were Filipinos who fought on the United States side because they were tired of seeing their pro-American friends and family get tortured and mauled by pro-independence Filipino guerrillas, which was commonplace. It was very common, okay? And the Filipinos, and this was written by a Filipino who wrote the book, The History of the Filipino People. This isn't about an American. He said the Filipinos matched the Americans stride for stride in wartime atrocities, okay? The massacre that the Philippines conducted in the church in Balangiga, that was not an act of revenge. The waterboarding and the tortures that the United States did was revenge because Filipinos, when they captured U.S. prisoners, they usually didn't let them live. Usually, they killed the U.S. soldier and then they gutted them, disemboweled them in the streets, left it for everybody to see, including other U.S. soldiers. And they would sometimes bury a U.S. prisoner in every part but his head, and then they would dump the head in sugar. And this usually occurred near an ant bed, and then they let the ants kill the prisoner, and the prisoner died a slow, painful death. It was sick and sadistic. Now, as I pointed out, the Philippines wanted to be independent, and they should have been independent, and the U.S. was in the wrong on this, and which is one reason I believe the bells should be returned ASAP. But the Philippines is our friend now, okay? It needs to be returned where it shows the past is the past. We learn from both countries learn from their mistakes, because while the U.S. needs to apologize for being in that war and for not letting the Philippines be independent, the Philippines need to apologize for the tortures that they committed not only on U.S. soldiers, but on the pro-American Filipinos, which were pretty bad. They were actually really bad. And both sides need to apologize, and we need to move forward. We're close allies, and that needs to stay the same, okay? The bells do need to be returned, but it doesn't need to be coupled with a lot of the wrong things that America did in its history, because America did a lot more right than wrong, and this war was in the minority as far as the things America's done wrong, not the majority. The majority of things America's done has not been wrong, it's been right. And that it doesn't need to be coupled with white guilt, because, as I pointed out, had Spain surrendered to the Philippines and not the Americans, the Spanish would have been massacred. And most people from Spain are, they speak Spanish, but a lot of them are blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And the American soldiers were blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and were many of them racist? Yes, there were writings of soldiers believing their race was the superior race, and things of that nature, but that was no different than the way the Filipino guerrillas thought about the U.S. soldiers. and who tortured their own people who thought different than they did about that situation. So the Philippine soldiers were just as racist as the U.S. soldiers in that situation. So it doesn't need, that's why I'm, doing this video, I'm not embarrassed for my hair, skin, and eye color, because the people who fought on the other side were just as prejudiced. Things have changed now. As I pointed out, the majority of the Philippine soldiers in the Korean War were not anti-white, and it's changed now, and it's not like that at all. And it's the same for the Americans. There's not a lot of anti-Filipino prejudice in the U.S. at all. I've lived in the U.S. almost all my life, and there's not a lot of anti-Filipino prejudice out here at all. There's some, but not much. So both countries have changed for the better on this, but during that time, both countries were equally racist to each other. But the past is the past. We need to return the bells to the Philippines as a matter of reconciliation, but also use it as a way to move forward, not a way to make somebody feel wrongfully guilty for something they didn't do, but for something their ancestors did. But then at the same time, it wasn't just a clear case of one side good and one side bad. It was a lot more complex than that, as I just pointed out in the video. So anyways, hope everyone's doing well. Take care. God bless them. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.